Hello, this is Dean Radin, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hello, this is Dr. Raymond Moody, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, Cultural Creatives. I'm Bruce Lipton, and I'm here to join you with Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Carol Ritberger, medical intuitive, and this is Your Superior Self.
Perfection. Carol, thank you for joining. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy out there in Hawaii, but thank you.
Thanks for putting the plug in for Hawaii.
Well, it's my place. It's my dream place. It's where I want to go. My visualizations in the morning are myself on the beach, just admiring the sunrise and being there. It's what centers me. It's what re-energizes me. It's what keeps me going, grinding during the weekends and nights to put this together and have great conversations with people like yourself. And that's what I'm trying to manifest.
You're all in the step in the right direction. You're kind of in Hawaii with me, so this is good.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I'm in Hawaii.
So here we are. The only thing we don't have is the beach, but oh well.
So Carol, let's talk about you. You have a very lengthy resume. So why don't you kind of bring us up to speed, but give me the cliff notes. What's going on? How'd you get to where you're at?
Okay. So interesting journey. I'm basically a researcher, and my background is in personality behavioral psychology. And I wanted to kind of know why we are predictable and our behavior is predictable and what makes us tick. And then in 1981, I died. And I was declared medically dead. I don't know how important that is, but for me, that was really important. So I wouldn't question whether I really died. So I died and went on a very, very interesting journey. It was nothing like I had perceived it would be. For example, I thought there would be a tunnel of light. I ended up in a car wash. I used to go there with my dad all the time on a Saturday. It was our special time. So we'd go and we watched the cars go by. And in this particular case, when I crossed over, I didn't have that tunnel of light. I didn't have the angels. I didn't have a lot of things that I thought would be there. But what I did have was the opportunity to touch a part of myself and a part of what I call existence that I never felt before. There was a grace, there was a reverence, there was a love. I don't know whether I'd call it unconditional. It was just a love. And it was really a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And then I remember instead of cars, I watched a conveyor belt go by, and it looked like soul. It looked like bodies, but it really wasn't. And I realized that where I was I was literally on that path of crossing over. And I had an experience where I remember thinking, and the best way I can say that is, when you first enter into a near-death experience, your brain actually works for 4 minutes. And so your brain is always going in with old memories. So I was experiencing a lot of those favorable memories as a child and then as an adult. And it was like I was watching my life in front of me. We hear this, people say that, but it's really true. And I had the opportunity to really have a chance to step away from myself and found out that my work was to come back. I wasn't meant to stay there, and I was meant to come back and to share my story and to also share what I felt on the other side. And then how do I incorporate that with my science, my researcher, with this evolutionary process we're always in? And so I spent many years just trying to weave everything together. And what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to take the science and merge it with what I call the woo-woo, the esoteric, and to be able to create broader perspective of who we are, and then to be able to share that perspective with others so we don't get as trapped in our mind or as in our limitations of our daily existence or our name or our busyness or everything else. So that's how this all started.
So you had to die to find your life's purpose. That's
Yeah, it was that fine print in that agreement that I forgot to read that disclaimer.
Well, were you before the near-death experience, were you into woo-woo or were you more of a scientist?
No, I was really more of a scientist. I was raised in a very structured household. I was in a very structured religion, and this isn't something that even was crossed my mind. It was just a very pragmatic world that I loved being in the research world because of all the possibilities. But no, not at all.
And then when you came back and you started realizing, oh, like, first off, I'm sure you can't really even explain it really, right, in terms of what you felt. But you've had this sense of you needed to share this experience with other people, and you're doing that. But was that map, or that, that was that route? Did you have to find out for yourself? Did you have to map it yourself? Like, or did you know what you had to do? Like, does that make sense? Like,
yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's an excellent question because it's one that I've really contemplated a lot. And so when I came back, my sight had literally been altered. It had changed the chemistry of the brain, the ocular, the optic nerves and everything. And I could literally see what I finally learned after many months of researching was called an aura. And so I was able to see this energy around others. And when I first came back for about the first 2 months, I was literally almost blind from the standpoint, all I saw was color. And then I would listen to the voice to try to determine male or female. And so, and I thought, well, it'll go away, and it didn't. And I started realizing that the aura of us also has a predictability. And I started connecting that with my research with personality, neurology, physiology, and started connecting the dots. But it wasn't an easy path. I mean, I lost a husband over it. I lost a father that didn't talk to me for 7 years. I really felt what a lot of us talk about, feeling really alone in this. But on the other hand, I knew I wasn't alone. Mm-hmm. So in this particular case, then what I did is I could actually go in and just research. That's what I did. I researched. I talked to anybody about, do you see auras? I finally learned how to spell it, and it'd be like, no, not really. And then, so it just was a process.
Mm-hmm. So when you say you lost a husband or you lost your father, like, you lost him because of this gift, or what?
Well, they just, I mean, how do you explain coming back and you just feel so different? You actually act different. And then what happens is then you go in and you try to explain this to other people, and it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And my father, raised in such a strict religion in itself, it was just impossible. And from his perspective, something bad had really happened to me, and I wasn't the daughter that he knew, which I wasn't. But anyway, so it was a very difficult path. The first 6 years of it were ones that I honestly had a lot of conversations like, I'm sure with what I'm learning, there's a reason for this. I haven't found it yet. I'm not sure I want it. I started finiting my sight, finited to where I could start seeing what I was understanding illness in others. And it's like, well, what do you do with that? You certainly don't go up to them and say, oh, by the way, your aura's got the indicator that there's a heart attack. You just live in a world of chaos and just trying to connect the dots.
Chaos, connecting the dots in the chaos. I've always wanted to ask somebody this question. Someone who comes out of that and losing a husband and a father because of your experience, and you trying to search for the meaning of that experience, and you shaking the beliefs and the dogma and indoctrination up to that point in your life, it's basically shattering. The handcuffs are falling off. How do you, and I think I remember us having a conversation, but you have kids, right?
I have a daughter.
Daughter. How do you talk to your daughter about that, right? Like, I've always wondered that, because I look back at I'm looking at my kids now, and I'm like, how do I have these conversations about the universe with them when they're so young. And it's not like, I'm so unsure of myself, like what I'm experiencing or my meditations or my visualizations. Like, at what point do you have these conversations, and what are some of the answers that you had for her questions?
Well, the first thing is that you just ease into it. It's an interesting thing that I've realized from all of this past is that there's a part of us that just knows when it's the right time. It's just almost like, I know it sounds real woo-woo, but it's like the universe and where you are all come together and create an experience that a conversation opens. And then you just take and you share as much as you, first of all, you're comfortable with, because you don't want to make them uncomfortable. But in my daughter's case, what I would do is I would say, it was interesting when she was a little girl, I painted a rainbow over her bed. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of her headboard. And I put it over her bed. And I always used to say to her, you were born under a rainbow. And as we got to the point, and when I came back and the conversation started to present themselves, then I was able to actually build off the way that this works, is to build off and say, remember that rainbow that was over your bed? Mm-hmm. Well, that rainbow is part of who you are. And then I could talk about the aura and lead into it. And then we'd have another conversation. And finally, the conversations were little snippets. And then finally, one day, she just basically said to me, so Mom, what is it like to die? Does it hurt? Were you afraid? Was there literally, could you see God? Did God come to meet you? And that opened up the doors for us to be able to go in and in my way that mine was with a sense of humor, there is a cosmic sense of humor. I said, no, I didn't have any of that. And she goes, oh, really? And I said, yeah, it was more like being in a car wash and just kind of watching bodies go by and we just laughed. And what that did is it started her thinking about herself differently. And as she became more comfortable with herself, and of course, I've always been an encourager. I'm sure you're the same way with your children. And it just got to a place where it became almost second nature with her. It's kind of, we don't go around and go, oh, by the way, my mom sees auras. We don't do that because I'm not comfortable with it. So we just kind of learned to talk and dance and open and kind of let this unfold the way that she needs it to and the way that I need to.
I love that. That's like letting it blossom, right? Just letting it.
Yes, exactly. That's it exactly.
Naturally unfold.
Yep. And our soul is so wise, Trey, that what it does is it navigates. That's one of the things that we don't in our humanists understand, because our mind is always so fixated or so used to following what is, that it doesn't realize that these synchronicities and these coincidences and these different situations and experiences we have where something just magically appears, those are all part of the process of the journey. And that's really what our soul is doing, is it's saying, okay, here's an opportunity. What are we going to do with it?
Do you have a lot of that synchronicity in your life? Like, do you have things that always pop up to let you know that you're on your path? I
do.
Yeah. I do. What is it for you?
Well, for me, it's, it's interesting. It starts with an intention. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back and say that I'll go back to when I first started doing the medical intuitive work. And I realized that while I was looking at auras and I was actually doing sessions with people, I would actually set the intention that I would like to be able to see and experience diabetes. What does it look like in the aura? And then it would be like, I wouldn't think anything more about it. And then all of a sudden my month would start to book out readings. And in about a week and a half, every reading I did was diabetes. So it's like if we set an intention, then the experience present themselves, and then we learn from that.
Mm-hmm. I always see numbers, like numbers pop up for me, right? Like the number 44 has nonstop shown up in my life, like for the last month, either 444 or 44, and it's everywhere. Like It's crazy. And it usually comes when I'm driving. Like,
Mhm.
you know, like I see it on license plates. I'll see it on billboards. I'll see it, I don't know, anywhere, right? Like anywhere.
Yeah.
And it always pops up, and it's just interesting. It's like, you know, I've read a couple of, or I went to the library. I shouldn't say it was a bookstore. But it was like an angel book of numbers, and my
Mhm.
daughter and I found the book, and we were looking at it, and we're just like, because she says she sees, I think it's either 222 or like 111 or something like that. And I was showing her what it meant, and I think it was like 222 or something. And I was like, it was something that she really loves, because she's all
Yeah.
about, you know, being, you know, the princess, and it was something like, you are born to shine, you're like this huge blessing. And she read that, and she was like, she lit up, and she was, you know, very excited about that. So now, you know, I'm always reminding her that she's this, you know, this shining star that was put here, because whenever she sees that, it's a reminder of her, or a reminder to her that she is that. And I searched 444, and it's just like, you know, just keep going, you're on your path. And I see it all the time. And it's like the universe like pointing me in that direction, like, keep going. It's like the theme of my life. It's like, keep going, just keep going.
Right. So the gift of that I've learned is that it's with those patterns that we experience around numbers or symbols or maybe butterflies or something. I believe each of us in our soul has some form of symbolism that we relate to. And when those come up, the gift of that is that we pay attention. And it's like, oh, here it is again. And it's like those gentle nudges from our soul that says, okay, look, here it is again. This is your on path. This is what this is meant to be, versus the mind that comes in and says, okay, well, it's 12:01 and you need to be on path. And those things we don't pay attention to. And what it also does is it connects us deeper to that intuition part of us that is part of our neurology. It's active in all parts of our brain, and it's connected to our heart. So when you see that and you acknowledge it, and then that memory comes back in, like with your daughter, you had asked about the experiences and how to have the conversations. Her soul and your soul put a perfect experience in front of you for the two of you to experience, you to teach her to teach you. That's what this is about. And it helps develop that intuition, and it doesn't make it feel as unpredictable or unreliable. And then what we do is we start looking for it. The brain actually says, hey, I want to see a 444. And then there it is on a license plate. Or it'll be like a truck will go by and have a 4x4 on it. Or you'll look at a clock and it'll be 444. Those are the way the intuition and the soul works to let you know, look, you're on course. And the interesting part of it that I've experienced in doing this work is we're always on course. We're always on purpose. We're always doing what we came here to do. But if we live in our mind, we don't recognize that. So therefore, it's difficult for us to find meaning, for you to find meaning in 444. So look it up, the numerology. So again, it's that very precious part of who we are.
Oh, I am trying to strengthen that intuition, right? Like, just because it's, you understand this, like our entire lives, we are taught that, you know, like, for one, my imagination, right? Like, I'm trying to strengthen that, turn these visualizations during meditation into something meaningful. Well, it's not that it's not meaningful, but more powerful. Like I am tasting the sauce of the universe through my visualizations, and like visualizing conversations with higher entities and higher power, and like, you know, trying to learn more information about the universe. And it's how, like, people remote view, like they go and they use their imagination to go to these places and find these or see things that are hidden. But the analytical mind's like, no, you're making that up. Like, that's not right. Like that's, you know, like this, like
absolutely it does. And it creates doubt. And we have a split second, literally in the workings of the brain, we have a split second from an experience to an action. And that there's a gap in between that I call intuition. And if we don't recognize whatever that symbolism may be, or we don't recognize that that's intuition, that self-doubt then triggers us and pushes us back into that intellect, into that logic. And the imagination is still there. It's just blocked. We can't see it. Mm-hmm. It's a pattern. It's an old pattern. It's a predictable pattern. It's a survival pattern. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing with the soul isn't about surviving. It's about thriving. Mm-hmm. So every time you see your numbers or these synchronicities or this intuition, and, we've always heard them described as flashes of insight, moments of aha. Well, yes, but a lot of times they just kind of drop in silently and it's like, oh, wow. It's like, well, that's not a flash of insight. It just kind of dropped in. And our job is to say, okay, it dropped in. Yay, good. Exact. What do we do with it?
I think I want to experience like what most people experience. No, I shouldn't say most people that are experiencing the universe on a whole different level, like people that are having out of body experiences, that are actually are traveling the universe or traveling the multidimensional universe and accessing these higher levels of knowledge that we don't have because we're obviously here in this physical plane. And I'm kind of confused. Like, is it, and you might not know the answer to this, but it's like, is an out of body experience really out of body, or is it like an inward journey, through imagination, through meditation?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because you literally do feel like you're out of body. I believe that the initiator of that literally is within you. And one of the things that I've certainly learned in the years I've been doing this work is that we can't will those things. We can't use an out of body or connect to that inner part of who we are if we're doing it out of desperation. If we're doing it out of just fed up with all of this life and everything that's around us. The mind and its conditioning is designed for us to survive. Everything it does, including the use of the ego, is for us to survive, to stay in this body on this earth, doing our work or going through the day. So when we try to use that process and that premise and that connection, that imagination, that creativity from that point of view, the chemistry in the body and in the brain isn't going to let it happen. It happens, like you say, when you're driving a car. It happens when you're lucid. A lot of times it'll happen just before you go to bed. A lot of times, honestly, it used to be that it happened when you would do LSD or you would do different things, because all of those things, what they would do is it would take that mind and scramble it or open it in a way that there were no limitations.
Have you ever had an out-of-body experience?
I did.
Besides near death.
Yes. Oh, okay. So no, I have not actually have not. I did when, of course, I was in that near-death experience when I could see myself in the ER room floating above my body, watching all of these doctors and nurses run around. I just thought to myself, my God, it looks like a colony of ants. They're running around trying to do something. And I heard somebody say, we're losing her, we're losing her. I'm going, no, you didn't. I'm way up here. I'm kind of out of body. But no, I haven't had that. I haven't had that. So I'm just going to do something personal with that. Sure. And this isn't to negate anything, but for me, as I've learned to allow myself to be more comfortable with this part of myself that I call woo-woo, but it's really who we are, that doesn't seem necessary. It's like I can go within and open up my mind, however I do that. Sometimes it's just daydreaming, sometimes it's driving a car, whatever it may be. And it's just like this whole world opens up. And then all of a sudden the imagination comes in and goes, oh, wow, that's great. Let's capture that. Let's do this. Let's do that. I'm talking on the phone, which you're not supposed to do. But no, I literally have not. I know others have, and it certainly
Sure.
isn't a debate, but for me, it's just going inside.
Sure. Oh, I just think there's different, like, people use different tools for their
Sure.
advancement in consciousness. I think out of
Yeah.
body is one of them. I don't think
Yeah.
everybody can do it. I think a lot of people can do it. I just think that they're not aware of that. And
Yeah.
people that remote view, I think that's another tool that people can use to
It
expand
is.
their consciousness. And I think the imagination is too. I think, Bruce Moen, who is a student of Robert Monroe and
Mhm.
Thomas Campbell, they all talk about it, where the imagination is just another tool set, another data set,
It is.
or another reality that we can go into, but people don't consider it real because we're not always there in our imagination. We're here
Right.
in our monkey brain. And just because, it isn't like our awareness isn't transferred into our imaginative state, and you don't feel like you're there 100%, doesn't mean it's not real. Like, I
Right.
think you're creating in that. I think you're, as a source of consciousness, you're creating that experience for yourself. And then if you can stay in it long enough and have a conversation with someone that is deceased, or what you consider a higher intellect, or a higher, maybe not a
Yeah.
higher, I shouldn't say higher, like more superior than yourself, but more maybe advanced in their spirituality as far as down the road. You have these conversations, and I think you lose that mind, that busyness. You forget that you're daydreaming, or you forget that you're using your imagination. And I think that you start accessing higher levels of consciousness, or higher levels of education, or higher levels of information, and you start
Yeah.
losing yourself, and the self dwindles and the ego dwindles, and it's no longer there. So like you're receiving, now you're in a position of receiving information.
Correct.
It's
And,
very fascinating.
As children, we survive on our imagination. That's how we navigate. And if our physical world has uncomfortableness to it, that feels uncomfortable to us, what do? We create an imaginary world, imaginary friends. And when we're little, it's like, oh, well, Carol has an imaginary friend. And it's like, well, that's really cute. And then we start reaching an age of 4 and 5 years old. Well, now it's not cute.
Mhm.
Now it's like, okay, well, that's great. And if we're 8 and 9 and 10, and we have an imaginary friend, then there's something mentally wrong with us. And it just goes on and on and on. And it's like a muscle. We lose the ability to do it. And one of the things of the soul is its imagination. So if we were to do, anything that feeds our imagination on a regular basis, like a muscle, like an exercising a muscle, my goodness gracious, it's endless what's possible.
Mm. I think it's great. I think that you're exactly right. Like, it's a muscle, and like society says, oh, that's not real. It's like you have to have this objective imperial evidence in this physical plane for it to be real, because this is what scientists and everyone says is real. And it's like, just this matter, everything that the new physics is explaining is everything is energy. So it's like, everything, I don't know, everything can be manipulated as energy. So it's like, can you manipulate your reality through your imagination?
Yes,
that
absolutely.
Kind of thing. And see, I always hear that. I always hear that, right? A caveat to that is, and some people, including myself, get discouraged because of the very slow, like dense reality that we live in, where that imaginative state, like, I feel like I'm split on this. It's like, because of everything that, it takes time in this space-time reality for things to form. Just like when you see things decay, right? Like, you see everything is temporary. Nothing is forever. You see things, deteriorate. You see even rocks and mountains and things, de-evolve, but it takes time. So like manifestation, it takes time in this reality, because I guess it's how long it takes to manifest something. I don't know. What were you getting ready to say about that?
Yeah. Well, I was going to add a little bit of levity. I'll go back and do that, and then we'll go on. Is that it's an interesting thing. As children, we use our imagination. We have friends. As you get older, whatever that means, and you start to disconnect with the world. And that doesn't mean dementia or Alzheimer's. You have a very vivid imagination. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you come in with it, you get to go out with it. It's just the in between that's the difficult part with it. And that's again because of the conditioning aspect of it. So one of the things that with the imagination part of it is that the mind thinks that it always needs to produce something. If we're going to imagine something like Steve Jobs, when he did that with the computer and everything, he imagined something and he didn't create it because his mind said he needed to create it. He created it from what I understand from learning about his biography and everything. What he did is he just wanted to see, is it real? Could it really be real? So he was constantly using his imagination. So it wasn't like he put down something on a piece of paper and said, oh, we're going to call this a computer. And the mind goes in and goes, well, now it's got to be a computer. You've got to dedicate your whole life to it. It was that feeding and that nurturing part of it. And that's what we are looking for. And I think that energy part that you're talking about is limitless. And I think that, and I know it's limitless. And I think that it's timeless. And I think that personally, one of the first things that would be helpful for us for the imagination is to not put it in a scheduler. It's like, well, between 2 and 3, I'm going to imagine it. I'm going to be imaginative. And then if you do that and you have that time and you sit down to do something that would allow your imagination, you can't get there. And then your mind gets, well, that's a waste of time. Now what are we going to do? Now the creativity goes. And then at the very last part of that hour, the mind goes, you've got to do something with it. You've got to produce something. Come on. And so we find that we want it. It's restricted. We get frustrated with it. And yet we want it.
Mm. Yeah. No, I find myself doing that all the time. Like I'll get up and go meditate in the morning. I'm like, all right, you have, you got 30 minutes to meditate and we have to go for a run and then we have to do this, we have to do that. Like it has to be a really good meditative session because I want to receive all the information from the universe. And then after the meditation, I'm like, sometimes it's like, it's really good, right? Like if I don't if I don't make any, a big fuss about it, but if I just, like you said, if I'm the less restrictive I am, the more I can tap
Absolutely.
in.
And the more wisdom you'll feel and the more intuition will connect and the more grounded you will feel, not the way we think of grounded, but you'll really feel like you're in your skin.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole different kind of bounce in your step in the day.
Yes. Plugged in, tapped in, whatever you want to call it. Like I feel that. Downloaded. I don't know.
Yeah.
Going back to the auras. So what can you get out of that? Like when you see someone's aura, like what information is available to you?
Okay. So this was a lesson that I learned and I'm going to share it because it was very pivotal for myself. And I always share it with others who want to develop their intuition or use their abilities. When I first started seeing auras, it was just absolute color. It was just mesmerizing, the dynamics, how they would change, how they would move, how the energy and the colors would extend way out and then it get really close. So I was just intrigued by it. And then it started finiting itself and I started seeing these patterns and I didn't know what it meant. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I would see illness. I would see death. I would see dead cells. I would see black in the auras. I'd see the things gray and this horrible green and all these different things. So then it's like, oh, pull back, Carol. Don't want to do any of this. So what I've learned, and the point of all of that was that I no longer go in and see anybody's field. I can see somebody, I always see auras. So I can see somebody coming down the street and see their aura, and all I see is their soul. All I see is the beauty part of it. I don't look for any more. I've actually trained myself not to do that. When somebody gives me permission, the energy field will show whether there's diminishing of energy, whether there's organs and glands and cells that aren't communicating the way they need to. So the medical intuitive part of the aura will actually put together a pattern that will basically reveal what organs and glands aren't working. I think the gift of what I do and how it's finited itself is, and anyone who does this work with doing readings with the aura tied to medical intuition, the aura always shows the origin site. And I'm not anti-medicine, I'm not anti-doctors, I work with them all the time. But the human body puts up symptoms. And we go to the doctor when the symptoms get so strong or so loud and our mind won't let us turn it off, and we treat symptoms. But in many cases, we don't get back to the origin. And that's one of the gifts of the aura, the energy body of who we are, is it will tell you exactly where this started. And it will also show you how it's mapping out.
So like how it started, like you can see where like, I don't know. I'm assuming like all like cancer to me, right, is just like, there's something in your energy, there's something in your body, there's something going on in your life that you're just not dealing with. Like maybe it's like stress, or maybe it's like, I don't know. Is it, I mean, can you see exactly where, like you said, the origin, like what, like a time, like a date, or like how does that work?
If that's important, when I'm working with someone, to go back and it would be important for them to realize that they've been living with the propensity for this for a long time. Sometimes that's very helpful. Mm-hmm. One thing, and it's always dangerous to do generalities, but I am going to do this after 40 years. That shows you my age. 40 years of doing this is stomach. Cancer always starts in the stomach. It always starts in the digestive system. It always starts in the foods that we eat, the way that our bodies use them. It starts with the way that we digest, whether we absorb or malabsorption. 85% of the immune system's well-being and ability to function and protect is tied to the stomach. 95% of serotonin, which is tied to the brain and moods and stress, the way we respond to stress, is actually in the stomach. So when we talk about food being our best medicine, or we are what we eat, those old cliches, what I have found is that if we are in a place where we're not getting the nourishment that we need from the foods we eat, or we're eating foods that are high in sugar. Sugar is a glucose, and your body's designed to process glucose a certain way. If you eat a lot of extra sugar, then your body doesn't know what to do with that. And one of the things that we've learned from cancer is that excess glucose that's not oxidized allows these cancer cells we produce every day to go rogue. They basically change their life cycle. They become the big bird in the nest, and what they want glucose. So, and then where it shows up in the body. So for example, if someone were to have breast cancer, or somebody had testicular cancer, or had lung cancer or anything, that tends, I find in the work that I do, that tends to be tied to their genetics, tied to their family history, tied to their DNA. That if there's, and I mean, we can go out of this woo-woo part and say, okay, so if a girl, young woman gets breast cancer and her mother had breast cancer, then that's why she got breast cancer. But there's more to it than that. It's just that what happens when the immune system can't function the way it's designed, it doesn't monitor that DNA. It's not able to really read what needs to be. Therefore, it shows up.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, I think there's much more to that. Like, I think the genetics has a play in that, but I also think like our condition, our external environments are very similar, right? Like, I mean, the stress of, that's the memory cells, the memory in the DNA, the stress from my parents. I have the memory cells in my DNA.
Absolutely.
Ancestral memory in my DNA. And then the environments that you're grown up in, like that, if they're very similar to your parents, and obviously the stress is going to be similar, the results in the body are going to be similar. If your diets are very similar, that's why, a lot of, like the breast cancer, like we mirror a lot of the time. If you are with your parents all the time, like you're going to basically mirror their health. You're going to mirror their thought patterns. You're going to mirror their stress levels, because it's like, you guys are all in there together. It's like, mirror neurons. I mean, it's crazy.
And we also need to realize that, emotions, the emotions, that chemistry changes that happen with emotions are a major player in the body's ability to be able to metabolize or to be able to stay healthy or so forth. One of the things I've done in my years of research is I've actually been able to, over the course of time, look at emotions and the role they play. So, for example, I found consistently in my research that breast cancer in the right breast are patterns of grief, loss. Patterns in the left breast is self-disappointment. With grief comes regret. If we weren't able to do what we need to, then we're disappointed in ourselves. And so, in the stomach, a lot of the digestive issues we have, things eat at us. So we use metaphors. We actually talk about these things. It's like somebody's a pain in the neck. So that's why our body is basically saying, hey, look at possibly the pain in the neck is more than just physical structure. Sure. So we have a lot of communication processes that sometimes we just don't listen to.
Yeah. I was reading on your website too, like the soul's purpose. Can you see that in someone's like aura, like the soul's purpose here now?
No. But what I can do, and this is my reward for coming back. When I do my work, I get to connect with somebody at a soul level. And at that point in time, I don't see them with anything we're going to talk about in a reading. I get to see them in their beauty. I get to touch their sense of humor. I get to touch a lot of parts of them that when I start putting it into words, they start to laugh. It's like, yeah, that's who I am. So I start there, and then the soul navigates me. One of the things that in a session is that the soul does not allow any information to be shared with someone until they are ready to hear it. So when I connect with them, it's joyful. When I take and I connect with them physically to be able to give them that bigger picture, psychological, emotional, energetic, physical, what's going on in their body, to help them understand that they have 4 different places. There's your number 4. They have 4 different ways that they can heal. If they are trying on a physical, it's not working, then maybe we do need to do something with emotions and imagination.
Sure.
So
do you have to be in person for these appointments?
I believed I needed to for a long time. I would literally have somebody sit in front of me, and I had a box of crayons because I didn't know how else to do this, right? I wanted them to see what I see. And then, like everything else over the evolutionary process, is that it's like, well, it's not possible to see them. So then that intuition, those steps along the way, it's like, oh, it's energy. Boom, connect.
So how do you, you said, I think last time we talked, that you couldn't see my aura because of the camera.
That's correct.
Still correct?
It is. Anytime that we have any kind of radio waves or any frequencies that are going to interfere with the person's energy and what we're seeing, it scrambles it.
So how do you have, if I was if I'm listening to this interview right now and I'm in the audience and I want to connect with you, and you're in Hawaii, which is one of my favorite places, but it's an island.
Yes.
A lot of people can't
like
go there.
3,400 miles away from the mainland, to be exact.
How is my appointment what is that gonna look like with you?
So what it does is I, again, connect, they send me their name and they send me questions. I actually ask them to put topics on the piece of paper so I can go visit and spend time getting answers before they work. I work with them. And then I just have the pleasure of sitting down energetically and getting to know them at a soul level. And then I go back and read the piece of paper. And then the soul starts presenting and giving me and connecting the dots. And then when the person's voice comes on, that really connects everything at a deeper level. And it's just like a conversation.
Oh man, now you got me so intrigued. Can you connect with me on a soul level right now, energetically?
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And what kind of information could you give me if you did that?
Well, you are literally sitting. This is an extension, I think, of when we first talked. But you're literally sitting on the apex of being able to really realize physically and mentally that what you're doing is making a difference. And that's going to be through just moments of excitement that you have. It's going to have the moments where things are going to fall into place, or somebody's going to say, oh, wow, I've listened to your superior self, just kind of out of the blue. And so, like you talked about the 444 and building off of that, because that's the way this works, is that there's 4 aspects of you. There's 4 aspects of the journey. And all of those are lined up, honey.
Mm-hmm. I love it. You got me excited right now, Carol. I love every time we have a conversation. I love talking to you. Like you just know how to make my day.
Well, you know what? Thank you. I'm going to take the credit, but really in all honesty, what it is your soul uses me to put into words so you can hear and see who you are.
I love that. 100%. I love that. Carol, this has been amazing. I can't believe what time it is. How can people connect with you? How can they find out more about you and buy your products and books?
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Website, www.carol, C-A-R-O-L, Ritberger, R-I-T as in Tom, B as in boy, E-R-G-E-R at Carol. And so let's go back. Ritberger.com. Golly, you know what? Louise Hay used to say to me all the time, and not to name drop, but she used to say to me all the time, Carol, you really need to get this down pat about when people say, hey, Carol, how can people get in touch with you? I am so, I just don't think about it, honestly. So I have to think about it. So it's cool. www.ritberger.com. And that will have my story. You can book readings. I've got some exciting new things. I'm going to do a 2/22/22, a talk on the energy of this year. It's Awakening the Cosmic Heart. And so just get on my mailing list. But thank you, Trey. I appreciate you doing that.
No worries. No worries. Carol, for the ones that are listening right now that are really questioning how they improve their intuition and some of their connection abilities to the universe, like what would be your very easy to follow advice?
Get out in nature.
There you go. I love it. Carol,
because
thank you
she
so much.
always has exactly what you're looking for.
Mother Nature, Mother Gaia. I love it. Carol, thank you so much for bringing Hawaii to me. Thank you for bringing your very loving and colorful energy. This has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you so much for having me.